Welcome to today's live chapter reading of In Plain Sight, Broken Bow, Book 3 by Ashley A. Quinn. Prologue. A bitter wind bit into Raina Neidhart's face as she hurried up the walk to her boyfriend's house, a casserole carrier in her gloved hands. Thomas had been out working on this cold all day with a local vet. He deserved a hot, home-cooked meal. She twisted the doorknob and walked inside, shuddering as she finally stepped out of the wind. It might be sunny, but the temperature was brutal. "Thomas?" "I'll be out in a minute," he called from down the hall. Raina walked through the living room to the kitchen and set the casserole down on the bar separating the two rooms. She took off her hat and gloves, shoving them into her pockets, then shrugged out of her coat and laid it over a bar stool. "Hey, babe," Thomas walked in, his dark hair damp from the shower. Water droplets dotted his forehead, and his t-shirt clung to his well-muscled chest. Heat licked Raina's belly as she drank him in. All these years, and she still thought he was the most handsome man she'd ever met. He leaned down and pressed a quick kiss to her mouth. "What's in the carrier?" She grinned and unzipped it. "Ziti and garlic bread." "That sounds great." She stood on her toes to kiss him again, then moved around the bar into the kitchen to grab some plates. "I figured you'd want something hot after being out in this cold all day." He sat on one of the stools and watched her work. "Yeah, it was nasty. Dr. Adelson hates this weather, so I did most of the work while he huddled in his giant parka and supervised." She giggled. "Can you blame him? He's like 70, and his assistant is a strapping, intelligent young man in his early 20s. Thomas sighed. "I know, and I appreciate the experience," he grinned. "It's paying off, finally." He lifted a hip and pulled a folded piece of paper from his back pocket, holding it out to her. "I got into vet school." "What?" She snatched the paper from his fingers. "Thomas, this is great." She unfolded the letter. "There's only one bad part." "The University of California," she said, cutting him off as she read the letter. He sighed. "Yeah, that's the bad part. But it's the best school in the country." "What happened to Colorado State?" He shrugged. "The letter came today, too. I got accepted, but UC's program is better." "Marginally." "Not marginally. They built a new research facility last year that's better than any other in the country. Raina, this is my chance to study with the best." "Yeah, but what does it mean for us? California's a long way away." "I know, but I'll be home on holidays, and you could fly out every once in a while." She straightened, frowning. "You want to do a long-distance thing?" He nodded. "For 4 years?" He ran a hand through his hair. "Yeah, that sounds like a long time now that you say it out loud." "You think?" "I know it's a long time, but I really want this, Ray." Raina's mind whirled. She couldn't imagine 4 years of only seeing him a few times a year, limiting their relationship to phone calls and texts. She thought about all her plans here for the little farm her parents granted her on their property when she graduated high school. She'd already started building her produce business, but she had a long way to go to get where she wanted to be. But was it more important than Thomas? She stared into his dark eyes. She wasn't sure she wanted a life without him. "What if I go with you?" Shock made his mouth drop. "You want to leave Silver Gap? What about your farm and all your plans?" "No, but I love you more than my farm." "So, just like that, you're going to move to Sacramento with me? What will you do there?" She pursed her lips and shrugged. "I don't know. Probably try to get a job at a nursery or at one of the state parks. I might even take some botany classes." She reached across the bar and took his hands in hers. "I just know I don't want to have a long-distance relationship. Not for 4 years." He sighed and turned his hands over to hold hers. "Your parents are going to flip." "Not too much. We'll be married, so—" Thomas jerked his hands away and stood, a deer-in-the-headlights look on his face. "Whoa. Hold on a second. Who said anything about marriage?" She frowned, an ache forming in her chest. "You don't want to marry me?" "Not now." Raina reeled back as though he had slapped her. Thomas wiped a hand over his face. "That didn't come out right. Yes, I want to marry you, just not right now. I'm not ready to have a family yet, Raina. I want to focus on building my career." "Who says we need to have a family right away?" "Then why do you need to be married?" "You think the only reason to get married is to have kids? How about the commitment to each other it represents? I've already been dating 5 years, and if I'm moving 1,000 miles for you, I expect that kind of commitment. I'm not going as just your girlfriend, no matter how much I love you." "Okay, say we get married. I know you. You're going to want kids. I'm not ready for kids." I know you're not now, but you won't be that way forever. But are you willing to wait another 5 or 6 years until I'm established? The ache building in her chest blossomed into a crushing pain. So even if we don't get married now, are you saying it still won't happen until we're nearly 30? He hesitated, but she could see by the look in his eyes that was exactly his plan. Raina. She held out a hand to stop him. Don't. She broke off a piece of the garlic bread and set it on a plate, then picked up a large spoon and heaped a portion of the ziti next to it before putting the foil back over the dish and zipping it back into the carrier. Don't me, he said, his expression hardening. Never once have I said I wanted to get married anytime soon. So this is my fault? Yeah, okay. He huffed and puffed and put his hands on his hips, looking at the ceiling. I didn't say that. Sure you did, just not in so many words. I don't want to argue semantics with you. I don't want to argue with all. All I want is to not get married. Yeah, well, you're getting your wish. She took a fork from the silverware drawer and slammed it on the counter. There's your dinner. She picked up the carrier, walking around the bar to put her coat on. Wait, you're leaving? She scoffed, sarcasm dripping from the sound. No, I'm just eating on the porch. He took hold of her arm to stop her as she walked past. Are we breaking up? Raina stared straight ahead, knowing if she looked at him, she'd start blubbering incessantly. Seeing as how we're at an impasse, I think that's probably best, don't you? We want different things from life. I'm ready to get married and start a family in the next couple of years. You, obviously, are not. And who knows if you'll ever be. All I know is I can't live the life you want. Well, I guess we are then, because I most definitely don't want a wife and kids right now. Her vision swam as she shook her arm loose from his grasp. Standing on her toes, she pressed a kiss to his cheek. Goodbye. Her voice broke, and a tear leaked as she walked away. As she closed the door behind her, her heart shattered into a million pieces. 12 years later. A cold wind whispered over Raina Nader's face and through her hair as she cut the engine on her utility vehicle. She glanced back at the wagon she towed. It was full of a dozen different kinds of tomatoes and peppers, and she still had more to pick. She needed to hurry, though. There was only about an hour of daylight left before the sun dipped behind the mountain and cast the valley into deep shadow. Hopping out of the vehicle, she unhitched the wagon, leaving it parked next to the shed she used to store her harvest. She would unload all the crates later. Right now, she just wanted to get as much of the field picked as she could before it got too dark to see. Raina climbed back into the vehicle and backed up to a second wagon parked behind the building, already loaded with empty crates. She made quick work of hitching it up and then set off for the field. Once back in the rows of pepper plants, she cut the UTV's engine and climbed out. She took a crate from the wagon and got to work. For 20 minutes, she made her way down the line of plants, the snip of her clippers the only sound other than the wind and the chirp of the evening birds. The peace was nice. It took the edge off the restlessness in her mind. The last few weeks since the disaster with her most recent ex-boyfriend, Derek Thorpe/Jared Fetter, had been rough. It had been a couple months since she had found out the man she'd started to fall for was a lying, manipulative psycho who killed her best friend's husband years ago when they were both part of the same SEAL team deployed in Afghanistan. Since then, Raina carried a hefty amount of guilt that she'd allowed him to get close to Tara, that she'd put her friend's life in danger by unknowingly supplying him with information. It had put a strain on her relationship with her friend. Tara kept telling her she didn't blame her, but Raina blamed herself, and it was much harder to gain her own forgiveness. She'd always been hard on herself. She glanced at the sky as she filled a crate, lifting it to carry it back to the wagon. One more row, and she would have to head back in. A muffled grunt made her pause just before she reached the back of the wagon. She glanced toward the row of beans, where the sound came from, trying to see through the dense foliage and growing darkness. Something scuffed the dirt, and she heard another low grunt. What the hell? Setting the crate on the ground, she withdrew the shovel from the back of the UTV, mindful of all the craziness that had gone on lately. Between the serial killer who abducted one of her best friends and the crazy ex-soldier who lied to her about who he was so he could get close to another one of her best friends, she wasn't taking any chances. Heart thumping, Raina moved through the rows of peppers towards the beans. She rounded the end of the row where she thought the noise came from, brandishing the shovel. Shock rounded her eyes. She dropped the shovel and hurried toward the young man curled up on the ground. Small, circular wounds dotted his arms. One of his eyes was swollen shut, and he cradled his dislocated left arm against his bare chest. Bruises discolored the skin around his wrists and marred his naked torso. As she got closer, he scrabbled backward. "I'm sorry, I'll pay for what I ate. I don't want any trouble." He backed further from her, struggling to get his feet under him. Rena stopped and held her hands out. "Wait, don't go. Please, you can eat whatever you want. I just want to help you." "My name's Rena. What's yours?" He stared up at her through his good eye. "I'm sorry," he mumbled again. He crumpled into the dirt as though his muscles couldn't hold him up anymore, and curled up on his right side in a fetal position. His dirty blonde hair hung in hanks over his face. Her mind whirled as she stared down at him. She'd never seen him before. She was sure of that. So where did he come from? His eyes closed, and he moaned. Taking a chance, she took a few more steps towards him, then crouched near his middle. She reached out and laid a gentle hand on his thigh. He jerked and started to scramble up, but pain from his dislocated arm made him fall back to the ground, moaning. "I'm not going to hurt you," she said softly. "Let me help you up. I'll get you to the hospital." His good eye snapped open, the white showing with his fear. "No, they'll find me and make me go back. I just need to rest for a bit. I'll be fine." "You need a doctor and a police officer," from the sound of things, she couldn't help but think. "Your shoulder is dislocated." "No hospitals." His voice carried a strength that surprised Rena. She stared down at him again, debating on what to do. She couldn't leave him out here, but if she tried to take him to the hospital, he'd bolt. Kind dark eyes and a mischievous smile flashed through her mind. Did she dare call Thomas? Would he even answer the phone if he saw her calling? The boy moaned again, wincing. A fine shiver ran through him, making up her mind for her. "Hang on, I have an idea." She stood and hurried back to the UTV, grabbing her jacket and her phone. Running back to the young man, she draped the jacket over him before pulling up Thomas's name in her cell. "Please answer," she muttered to herself as she lifted the phone to her ear. It rang 5 times before it rolled to voicemail. "Damn it," she sighed and tried again, and went to voicemail. Muttering curses under her breath, her thumb hovered over the home button, but she decided to try one last time. She touched the green phone icon once more and lifted the phone. He picked up on the 3rd ring. "I'm busy, Rena." "Thomas, please don't hang up. I know you don't want to talk to me, but I need your help." There was a pause, and she could almost see his face as he processed that. A little crease would form between his brows, and he'd get a slight purse to his lips. "Is one of your animals sick?" "No. Look, I don't really want to explain this over the phone. It'll be easier if you just come over and see for yourself." "Rena," the hesitation in his voice rang through the line. "Please, Thomas. I wouldn't ask if it wasn't important." She glanced down at the man again, who looked like he'd fallen asleep. He'd looked so young. Thomas sighed. "Fine, I'll be there in a few minutes." He hung up without saying goodbye. Rena released the breast she didn't know she'd been holding and turned off the phone screen, putting the cell in her back pocket. She bent down and gently poked the man, more of a boy really, on the hip. "Hey, I have help coming, but you need to get up." His eyes cracked open. "I told you, no hospitals." "It's not a hospital. It's just a friend who can help. Can you get up? I have a utility vehicle parked a few rows over." "You swear you won't take me to the hospital?" "I promise. Unless my friend says you could suffer serious permanent damage, then all bets are off." He stared up at her, weighing her words. Rainey decided to sweeten the pot. "I have vegetable soup waiting in the slow cooker back at the house. Fresh baked bread, too. I think I might even be able to scrounge up some homemade chocolate chip cookies." His eyes widened imperceptibly, and his tongue darted out to wet his lips. "With milk?" She smiled and nodded. "Of course." Indecision lit his face for only another moment before he shifted and stood on wobbly legs. Raina reached out to steady him and helped him toward the UTV. Once she had him settled in the passenger seat, she put the crate of peppers in the wagon, then hurried over to the driver's side and climbed in, starting it up. She tried to make the drive back to the house as smoothly as she could, but she knew the terrain jostled his injured arm by the pinch to his face. Even with his eyes closed and relaxed against the seat, he looked like he was in a tremendous amount of pain. They came to a halt at the back door of her little log cabin, which was a few hundred yards from her parents' 2-story white farmhouse. She'd have the cabin built a few years ago after her produce business took off. She loved her mom and dad, but she needed her own space. Raina shut off the UTV's engine, then hurried around to help the young man out. She led him to the door, giving the knob a twist. Figuring he would be more comfortable in a chair that he didn't sing to, she helped him to the dining table. "I'm going to get you some water." "Milk, please," he said. "I'm so hungry." She hesitated. How about we let my friend look at you first? If you need surgery, I don't want to put any food in your stomach. She could see the protest brewing, so she headed him off. I meant what I said in the field. If he thinks your condition is serious enough you need a hospital, you're going. We'll figure out the rest later. He glared at her but said nothing. Raina walked to the sink and got a glass from the cupboard, filling it with water, then took it to him. He nodded his thanks and then took a hearty gulp. She heard the front door open and turned to look. Thomas walked in, his large frame filling the doorway. Her heart skipped a beat at the sight of him, like it always had since they were 16. His eyes landed on hers, and he stared at her for a moment, before they shifted to the disheveled man sitting at her kitchen table. He walked further into the house, closing the door, a deep frown marring his handsome face. Raina? What's going on? Who is that? She walked toward him, casting a glance at the boy before looking up at Thomas. I'm not sure who he is. I found him in my field. She lowered her voice. He's been beaten and burned. I think his left shoulder is dislocated. I also think he's dehydrated. Alarm widened his eyes. He stared at the young man for a second, then looked down at her again. Why did you call me instead of taking him to the hospital? He wouldn't let me take him, said they would find him there and make him go back. Who's they? She shrugged. I don't know. He wouldn't tell me his name either, but he's in a lot of pain, Thomas. I did tell him if you thought he needed serious medical attention. He was going to the hospital whether he wanted to or not, though. She laid a hand on his forearm. Please, just take a quick look at him. I know you're a vet, but you have some EMT training, and I didn't know who else to call. He's scared and in pain. Those lovely lips pursed as he regarded her. He nodded and stepped toward the stranger. I'll look at him, but he probably really does need a doctor.